3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back to Rogue Creators, presented by Go RogueX. My name is Brian Fitton.
And I'm Lauren Lewis.
And this is the podcast dedicated to marketers and creators who are wanting to serve first and stand out from the crowd. Make sure that you subscribe every single week, YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, to get all of the tools and resources you need to be the go-to name in your industry. Let's go. We are going to dive into some really cool things today with our guest, Nichole Hamilton. How's it going, Nichole?
Doing good. How are you guys?
Good. This is your second time on the podcast,
yes.
Right? Oh,
yes.
That's right. We got a two-timer coming back. We are in a new studio space, too. So if you're not watching with us, you can totally jump on YouTube or Facebook. We have all the video up there and obviously on the blog, too. I got to give a shout out to the blog.
Correct.
Yeah, we're really excited to be back with you guys to be discussing presentations and design. And Nichole, on our last we've worked with Nichole a little bit, and she said, "Hey, I used to design a lot of things in PowerPoint," and we're like, "PowerPoint? What is that?" So I'm really excited to talk about presentations and really what we can use in different design tools, but specifically around PowerPoint and all the cool stuff. If you've not seen Nichole's work, it's amazing. So I'm really excited to jump into that topic. But before we do, Lauren, what do we like to do on the show?
Each week we like to ask, what are you obsessed with this week? So starting with our guest, Nichole, what are you obsessed with this week?
Okay, so I had to think about this kind of long and hard, but we're all podcast fans.
Yes.
And one of my favorite podcasts is Junk Food Cinema. And it is co-hosted by a screenwriter and a film critic.
Okay.
And they talk about junk food movies. So movies that we love but aren't necessarily high art or critically, successful. And they're currently doing a 3-part series on Last Action Hero.
Oh, so way longer than the actual movie is.
Yes,
Awesome.
Which I personally think is a really underrated movie.
Yeah.
I loved it when I was a kid, but it was like critically panned, and basically everybody thinks it's like Arnold's worst movie.
Just silly.
Yeah. So I was really happy to see that it's getting some love, and I've listened to 2 out of the 3 parts, and so far so good. So
nice.
Check that out if you like junky movies and or movie podcast. It's really good.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
So the especially with that, I always get the 2 confused with Jingle All the Way, because it becomes a kind of the superhero at the end of it, but it was kind of mash in my mind. It's been forever since I've seen that movie, but so good. What about you, Lauren? What are you obsessed with?
So I have been watching this show, and it's definitely not critically acclaimed either. But it's called Cursed. It's a Netflix original. It is like a spin on King Arthur a little bit. So it's about like 10 episodes long, and it's kind of trying to tell like some kind of tale within the legend of King Arthur, but they're taking a lot of license on it. And I enjoy like sci-fi and fantasy, so this was kind of just one of those fun, interesting Netflix originals. They've been working really hard on some of their content, and so it's cool to see them, like the set work and everything that they've been doing. I mean, it shows like a mastery level, but I still wouldn't be like, this is the best thing ever. But it's been very entertaining.
Nice. Well, in honor of our guest today, who also has an awesome podcast, what is the name of your podcast, Nichole?
It is the Chiaroscuro Horror Podcast.
Love it. And we talked about that on a previous episode. We didn't find that episode number.
Yes.
Send that out. So, but in honor of you, I was actually thinking about this because I was like, what am I have been like really into this week? And I swear I'm going to start an A24 film podcast review, just A24 films, and just walk through basically from their first one, which I forgot now, but all the way through their current stuff. We watched The Witch the other night again. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Love The Witch. We watched Lighthouse, actually, with your husband.
Yes.
Which was
boy.
phenomenal. Oh, yeah. So if I can, oh, man, I got Nichole kind of see. Okay, good. I'm headed down the right path. But anyway, we've been into the weirder of the just movies, and I just have an appreciation for Robert Eggers. That's his name, who directed and wrote both of those
Yes,
actually.
The Witch and The Lighthouse. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even mean to make that comparison, but those are kind of where we're going. So I'm like really into some crazy movies right now. So
Well, if you ever did that podcast, people would love it.
really, yeah,
Yeah, A24 has like a really big following for good reason.
Yeah.
But I think people would be all into that.
Yeah, we need to do that. Okay. Because I have
Next
some
hobby.
time. Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so if you guys reach out to us, let us know what you're obsessed with too. We're always trying to figure out new movies or TV shows or tools or anything like that that we can dive into with you. So make sure you let us know. Hit us up on Instagram. This is your call to action this week. Follow us on Instagram. Go Rogue X. Make sure you guys are out there following us and let us know.
Yep.
All right. So let's dive into our awesome topic today. Lauren, kick us off here.
Sure. So you slide the paper. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about making a spectacular presentation. And I think we typically get stuck in a lot of our ways that we do that there's only one way to do that. And I think one of the things that Bryan and I discovered through Nichole is that you can use some pretty old school tools, but you can use them in a modern way, which is why we wanted to talk to you. So she had done some amazing design work and wanted to show us what she had done for us, sent it over, and we were like, this animated video is phenomenal. We love it. And then she was
So simple. It was like very simple, very clean.
We were like, it was so impressive.
Really
We were able to send it to one of our clients. They were like, this looks great. And then she was like, yeah, through PowerPoint. And I said, is that even a thing? So tell us a little bit about utilizing those tools for like graphic design and also for presentation.
So most designers will tell you that they hate Microsoft products,
Yeah.
And in particular, like most designers don't really know how to use PowerPoint. But I worked for an agency for about a year that used almost exclusively PowerPoint and Keynote because they built presentations for high-level, high-technology Fortune 500 companies.
Wow.
And these companies, they have these big giant conferences in front of thousands of people, or even just within their own staff. They have these huge gatherings, and they have to have really slick, really effective presentations. And so the best way to do that is still PowerPoint or Keynote if you're on a Mac.
Yeah.
We use that way less, but sometimes still got to use it because when you send it to the client, they need to be able to still edit the content. So putting something together that looks as good as possible but is still usable on the client end is really important.
That's tough because, I mean, you're not sending, like, even with just general clients, you're not sending them an Illustrator file, like, so they can make their own changes. You basically cement it, and you're like, okay, here it is. Like, don't touch it. You can't change anything about it. But if it is a presentation, because presentations change right up until, I mean, you go live. I mean, that's a lot of times that's what happens. So that is interesting. So it's working from the end in mind, where you're kind of going backwards, like what makes it easier for our clients to be able to edit this stuff. Most of them, I'm assuming, if you're in an executive role, you're not in Keynote, you're not in anything. And if you're an administrative assistant helping that executive, most of the time you're probably going to be in Microsoft. So that's interesting.
And
okay,
what I
that makes a
found
lot of
too
sense.
is that, like, when I first took the job, I wasn't like super jazzed about. I was like, how's this going to go? But I was also like, well, it's a challenge and it'll be something new. And I really came to kind of love it because you do have to. It's my art director at the time was like, it's not a design tool. It's just not, you know. And so we, the whole team, we would kind of share tips and tricks of, you know, how to make it work for designers, even though it wasn't intended for designers.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so now are you running both a Windows machine and an Apple machine, two different laptops? Are you?
Nope.
So you can get PowerPoint, obviously, on different.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just like you would have like Word or Excel or whatever on your Mac. PowerPoint, there's a version for Mac as well. And when you save it out on your Mac, you can still open it in Windows, like it's not, or on Microsoft.
Yeah, just the file type or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. That's actually, I mean, again, on this podcast, we always try to figure out different ways to do things because just because you use Adobe for most things, a lot of times, even with clients we've worked with, I mean, sending them a PDF or a PNG or a JPEG of something, it just depends on what their level of understanding how to use those,
Right.
You know, that creative. And so that's pretty cool. So I'm interested too of how, even going into like some of the design aspect of like, are you creating outside of that and then putting into PowerPoint, or are you creating inside of PowerPoint some of the animations and different things like that?
It's kind of a hodgepodge, and it kind of depends too on what your goal is. So like you said, I sent you guys like some design comps for your clients. And I had actually never done that through PowerPoint before, but just because I had never worked with you guys and I wanted to present it in a really just like cohesive way, I thought, I think I'm gonna just use PowerPoint to do this. I haven't done it in a while, and let's just let's see how it goes. And obviously it worked out. Yes. So it definitely depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but for the most part, everything is designed elsewhere and then pulled into PowerPoint as like an image or an object or whatever. And then all the animation though is within PowerPoint.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, we're big fans of Canva and cameras. But Canva in general has done a great job with really making graphic design easier for somebody to understand who is not a designer. But we did try to use that for presentations and use some of the animation, some of the video aspects in there. And there was, just like any kind of web program, there's not a lot of control.
Right.
And so, Loren, what was that experience like?
I think it's interesting. Actually, on one of our podcasts later this month, we're going to be chatting a little bit about Canva's live presentation tool that they've now rolled out. So I bet it would be better this time around.
So this is a prequel to the
But yeah, I think also as video editors, we're so used to being able to like work on a timeline. So we're able to split everything to the second. And so the fact that we had no control over when the image was going to mysteriously fade away was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, and even the preview, I think, too, of us trying to we previewed it and it looks great. But then when you're giving the presentation, the end screen is something that you have to adjust your colors and different things like that for it, wherever it lands. And that was that was interesting.
Yeah. So which is actually a really good question. With the rise of technology, a lot more graphic design tools are getting in the hands of rookies. And so, which is like exciting, but also it's like there's a reason graphic designers exist. Right. So Canva would be a great one. I really wanted to know of your opinion of like, do you love it or hate it? And what advice can you give for like specifically like business owners who are trying to do a little bit of their own graphic design work?
I personally have never used Canva because I've never had the need, but I've heard more and more clients over the past couple of years keep bringing it up. And so I feel like it's got to be a valuable tool. And I think anything that's going to help a non-graphic designer make their brand look good, I think is always going to be a good thing. I think the problem might come in when you try to use Canva for things it wasn't intended for. And then when you can't get it to do what you want it to do, or it's not achieving your goal, you don't call your graphic designer and you just wing it. Because a tool like that, as you said, it's going to have limitations. It's not a professional design tool. It's just supposed to be, something simple to assist you. So when you get to that threshold where you're feeling like this isn't what I need, that's where you need to like maybe put it down and call your designer. I also think Canva probably works best when you have strong brand guidelines.
Yes.
Because when you are not a designer, the less choices you have to make, the better off you're going to be. So if you already know, okay, I'm only working with these colors, I'm only working with these fonts, and especially if you have a designer that's given you some templates, or if Canva has some templates that, that looks like my branding, like just pick the things that look like your brand and stick with it. And don't feel like, I've done 4 posts with this template, I need to do something more fancy. Nope. You just need to stay the course, because even designers, we design brands, a year later we get bored. Another designer that's never seen it will tell you it's amazing and it's so cool, and you're like, I'm done with it. I'm kind of done with it, So and brands do need to be freshened up from time to time, but if you're a business owner, if you're a novice and you're just trying to stay polished, like you just need to follow your brand guidelines and don't try too hard to go outside your wheelhouse.
I think that if anything, I think it's made people understand the appreciation for a designer too, and just design elements and design guidelines and what proper design actually looks like, because you see these things, you're like, I could do that. And then when you actually get into it, we've had a lot of people even just that say that, like, well, it's not exactly following what you're doing, and you're using 5 different types of fonts on one post, and now you're doing, like one element, and it just, I think it kind of, we always kind of go back to, because I'm bad about this, I'm like, all of the cool fancy, like, just do everything. And it's like, well, let's pull it back. Let's just do simple. Simple is always best. It's always the best way. So it's like, I just trying to kind of look at it from a designer's perspective. But then also, I mean, you made a great point, is you have to, just like with us, it's like we have that design knowledge to a degree. But at some point we're like, you know what? I'm just kind of tired of trying and it not looking good. We want to make sure that we have a professional come in, somebody who does this, who knows really the ins and outs of this, to be able to actually make it look great, tie into the brand, and then honestly communicate whatever it is, with that content, bring that value to that customer. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've noticed a lot is, especially with like Canva and those other tools, we see a lot of brands that are branching out. And one of the things that we're seeing is with like fonts, of just an understanding of the importance of a font. And so I wondered if, as a graphic designer, if you could speak to that, is what is in a font, and why isn't it important for businesses to be aware of the power of the fonts that they're using?
That's good.
Well, any designer will tell you fonts are important. We're font nerds, we can tell you like what the font on pretty much any like billboard or whatever is. And as with many graphic design things, I would say keep it simple. You really can't go wrong with your good classic like serif, sans serif. If you stick to those, you're probably going to be okay.
And like good Comic Sans, just really solid,
Did you see that Instagram added
yes,
Comic Sans as one of their story fonts?
So here's a cry to the public and to you and your business: please do not use a Comic Sans style of font. Even though it looks fun, it's not. I
have a funny story about Comic Sans. Our one of the agencies I worked at, I guess she was like the office manager. I'm not sure she had an official title, but she did a lot of our like filing and a little bit of the bookkeeping, and just like kind of kept the office, organized. And she put Comic Sans on everything, like all the file folders and all of our little memos. And like within the office, I'm like, listen. And she was also an elementary school teacher. Like she worked part-time for us. And she was, she was a very likable person, and we got along, so I never gave her a hard time. But then she put Comic Sans on an email out to clients.
Yeesh.
And so I was giving her a hard time about it, and she was like, it's fun. She's like, these other fonts are so boring. And I'm like, but we have to be professional. We're an agency. And she was just, we went back and forth, and she eventually told me, she was like, font you.
Ooh, that's a good one. We're going to have to start using that around here.
Yeah, that became like our cheesy burn around the office after that, And I don't think she's ever stopped using it either.
Didn't change
So
anything at all.
basically.
No, I failed. I mean, I don't think we ever had Comic Sans go out to clients again. But
nothing changed in the office. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So fonts being important, obviously communicating a message, that's a big deal, because it really is. I mean, again, we've had clients design their own stuff. Like we'll set up templates and do things for them. All of a sudden we'll see some type of crazy post, and they're like, all kinds of, I'm not going to get into specifics, but it is one of those things of we want to help guide them and say, hey, we really want to protect your brand, and a lot of times they just don't know. It really, I mean, I didn't know, really several years ago. And so how is that communicated? How important it is to obviously stay within your, how many fonts do you think are appropriate for a brand to have?
I would say 2 primary, and then a third maybe as an accent, or maybe have a couple of different like body copy types, like maybe you have a serif and a sans serif. But definitely 3 is probably good. If you're a more advanced brand, you can get away with more. And I definitely love a good ridiculous script, or like a super chunky serif, or something that's just a eensy bit hard to read, but like is like really beautiful. And in those instances, I would say let your designer decide how to apply that, and use it very, very sparingly. So like if you have a really gorgeous serif, one of my clients, there's a script that is one of their main fonts, but we only use it for like one word on a headline.
Interesting.
If it was a whole sentence,
probably couldn't read.
you really couldn't read it. But
yeah.
it's beautiful when it's just like one word that we've, pulled out of the headline to emphasize.
Yeah.
So you can do more complicated fonts, but if you're going to do that, you really need to do it sparingly, and your core fonts need to be very, very simple.
Yeah. I tend to jump on trends, pretty heavy. And so I try to, I'm like, hey, we should try this out. Because we're creating a bunch of content, so we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. If something new is coming out, I'm like, hey, let's figure out how to do that and make it our own.
Yeah.
But I will say that back in the day, do you know Eddie Vanzel at all?
We have some mutual friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great designer. He did some of my first logos and stuff. And I was always like super heavy trending. He's like, I know you want this, but like in 3 years, you're going to hate it. He's like, just don't. So I think kind of keeping it simple, find your brand and stick with that style guide, stick with that brand guide.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. That's the case for keeping all design simple, is that it will stand the test of time much better. And if you are going to throw trendy elements into your design and into your branding, make it something that can easily change. Like, don't make your logo super trendy and then have to change your whole logo.
Yeah.
Maybe you throw in some trendy elements that then can be refreshed in a couple of years.
Nice. Good advice.
Very good.
Bringing the heat today.
So,
Love it.
Kind of going into our overall topic of presentation. What advice would you give to particularly business owners who maybe are making a presentation deck? They can utilize, as you have proven, a tool like PowerPoint, but how do they not look like they're stuck in the 90s?
Well, there are a lot of good templates out there that you can download to start from. There are some free resources, but even on like Creative Market or Envato, you can purchase like pretty affordable templates. And that's probably a great place to start. Like I said, find something that looks like your brand, maybe download a template, because what you'll find is you open that up and there's already a bunch of slides that are designed.
So nice.
And then you can pop in your images, your text. But the main thing with presentations is that less is more.
Okay.
And this is a problem even I've had with other creative people and even agencies where they just want to say so much. They want to put so much copy on a slide. And the whole point of a presentation is communication. It's not to be fancy. It's not to wow people with your artistic skills.
Maybe a little bit, right?
Depending upon depending upon who you are, I guess. But, and if you don't communicate the message, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. You've not accomplished your goal.
Yeah.
Right.
And so anytime I have any kind of input on the content, I'm always slashing like most of the copy. And what you do is you put, the one important statement or maybe a couple of sentences, and everything else you want to say, you put that in the presenter notes. So you still have it in front of you, but you have a really beautiful, visual, simple slide with the statement you want to get across, and then everything else you reference in your notes, you talk your audience through it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when it's too much text, they're looking at that, they're trying to read it, they're not listening to you. So what you are going to say and what is on the screen, it's really important. It has to work together. So less is more is my main piece of advice.
So with that, we help 1 Million Cups, Startup Junkie here locally. 1 Million Cups is an organization that basically brings entrepreneurs together. You present there every Wednesday, and so the goal is to like share 1 million cups of coffee across the world on one given morning. And so the thought is with that too, we have presenters all the time, right? Somebody's always coming up, and I've noticed even a guy we had this morning, he was like, oh, I added too many slides in there. And so at least he was aware that he was trying to communicate a lot through that.
Right.
But I think this is good advice for them too, where it's like, you don't have to have 25 slides. Like, you don't have to constantly be going to the next thing and next thing and next thing. But what do you think an appropriate amount of slides would be if somebody's doing a presentation?
Oh, well, that all depends on, how much you have to communicate and how much
True,
time you have to talk. But saying that, 10 well-designed slides is better than 20 slides that have more information.
Yeah.
So if you're talking for 30 minutes, you could probably get away with 10 slides, I would think. Especially if you're incorporating some video and and images and stuff. But yeah. It gets crazy too. I think people, when they're putting it together, again, they're not thinking about how they're going to be talking through it. And so they're like, oh, this has to be in there and this has to be in there. And then when they get up to talk, it's like, oh, I can't get through all of this.
Yeah. Well, then you're speeding up, and then, you know,
Sure.
I'm talking about myself here in my presentation.
Yes.
Recently, I was just like, okay, we got to get through all this stuff, and then realizing like, wait, we have so much to cover, and even being able to understand like, hey, I probably don't have to cover all it. If it's going to make the presentation worse, like most of the time, those additional elements, unless they are like big cornerstones in your business that need to be stated, a lot of those details, that's a follow-up conversation, and that you should be. You did a great presentation. People should want to talk to you and obviously have a conversation after the fact.
And if you want to like have a leave behind, if it's the kind of presentation where you're going to do a leave behind, then maybe you can do a more robust version that has like your bullet points and your notes and all of that. But, you know, if it's going to be something that somebody's going to read later, that's a much different beast than people looking at you and looking at a screen.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, more and more people are doing Zoom calls, Zoom presentations, virtual presentations. And that's something that we never really talk about. Yep. Something that I was actually kind of frustrated, like morning of when we did a presentation here recently. I was like, we have no lead magnet to like be able to put them into a funnel, to even follow up with them. You know, there was nothing that like value we're giving after the fact. And that's so important, obviously.
Got to have that capabilities deck.
Oh, man. So much good stuff from Nichole today. It's good.
Absolutely.
It's good.
I'm glad somebody wants to hear it.
Yeah. Here's the deal. We can nerd out all day long. And I'm sure even our listeners too. I mean, it's one of those things that like, this is valuable information because we all are going through this right now, right? We're all trying to figure out design. We're trying to figure out presentation stuff. We want to do better. We want to communicate our message better. And so I think this is great. So
yeah, it is really great. So one of the questions I had just for you, particularly before we close up, was top tips you would give for business owners who are doing a little bit of graphic design. They may have gotten a Canva account, and just what your top tips would be for them as they're starting out, that they can kind of use on a general daily basis. They're not going to be trying, we will say this to all of our clients, do not design your own logo. Hire a graphic designer.
Yes.
Yes, do it.
Yeah, that is the one that we always stop them and say, sorry. We hire a graphic designer for that. But what tips would you give for them that, you know, maybe they're just trying to do an Instagram post for today and they have some tools and everything, but they don't know how best to sometimes utilize their style guide?
I mean, I'm going to kind of reiterate what I've been saying all day, and that is keep it simple.
Okay.
And know your brand. And I think if you kind of stick to your brand, stick to your font, stick to your colors, stick to your looks, and also pick good images. And there's really no excuse these days if you either have not done a photo shoot yet, have your own images, or you have some but not enough. Like there are enough stock, either free or very affordable stock sites out there that like there's no excuse for you to be using like low res. I ripped this off Google Images.
Yeah. Oh, please don't do that.
Yeah. So if you can, you know, and again, it's going to take a little bit of a time investment to like go through and find those maybe 20 images that are going to communicate your brand. But if you have good images and you're sticking to your brand guidelines, then you'll be doing great.
Yeah.
And also, if you're just starting out and you haven't even done a logo yet, right? You're not sure, you're not ready for that. I would say you can go on Pinterest, you can go on Dribbble, you can go on a million sites to kind of look at what other brands have done to at least sort of like maybe you don't have any colors and you don't have any fonts and you're not sure. Look at Apple, look at McDonald's, look at these big brands and see what they're doing, and look at brands that you like and what their color palettes are, and that way you at least have a jumping off point so that you can start picking a few things and choosing a few things, and then once you get to the point where you are ready to hire a designer to do your whole branding, you can show them these things. You can say, well, this I picked this and this is why, and I like this brand and this is why. And then you'll have a much more productive conversation, and you will be more likely to get the professional brand that you're going to be happy with that reflects who you are.
I love that. And anytime we talk about with designers, we're always like, don't you love it when somebody says, I want my logo to look like Starbucks, but also Nike. Like, I really want that. And then you come back with something and they're like, well, it's nothing like what I wanted. Like, well, you're kind of comparing, like having something already kind of designed and even a color palette or at least a general area where you're going is so helpful to a designer, because again, it's hard to know what you like and what you want, and, you know, creating a mood board. Is that still a thing? Do we create
Yeah.
mood boards? Okay,
Sometimes,
good.
yeah.
We have
Yeah.
some for our clients, so yeah.
That's true. Am I moody? Do we have a mood board for Go
Yes.
Rogue that
Yes.
is very everybody's like dark blacks, it needs to be dark or high contrast. We're like, Brian, we need to calm down. Okay, keep it simple, man.
Take it down a notch.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that that's great advice too. Of probably even before you're looking at hiring a design, like figure out what you like, what style you like, and then even again somebody who's in your industry, because there's been so many people who go like a tech startup route of some type of random name company that nobody really understands and doesn't really fit your brand and what you're doing, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we're a dog grooming place, and you're like, yeah, but you have like a high modern end tech vibe, you know, that's something that you may like it, but it may not fit your industry. So figure those things out. So I think it was great. That's awesome. Hey, Nichole, second one down.
Yeah.
We need to do a third one. We need to figure out something
Yes.
else. Yeah.
So we talked about podcasts the first time. We talked
did?
about design this time.
Yeah.
What are we going to do next time?
I know. Hey, send us in the comments. Let us know exactly what we need to talk with Nichole about. Yeah, give us your full range. What can you talk about? Where can we go with this?
I mean, well, we could always talk about A24 horror
Yes.
films.
Okay. Make sure you guys send that one in.
I
That's
might
gonna
know as
happen.
much about horror films as I do about design.
Yeah.
So there's that.
There. Yes. Okay. We're gonna make it happen. It's gonna happen, guys.
But Nichole, I mean, you've got a large wheelhouse. Where can people find you and your other podcasts? We didn't even mention that you have a Disney podcast.
Oh,
It's true. It's true. So, Disney Native is the name of the Disney podcast, and I have a co-host on that one. We were both. Well, I'm not a pass holder anymore. We were both pass holders, so all
you
of
lived close enough, I guess.
yes,
It was, yeah.
yes. So that whole podcast was basically like Disney World from a local's perspective.
Okay.
So we talked about all the insider kind of knowledge that you have as somebody who lives there instead of just being a tourist. So that's always fun. That one's way more laid back, just kind of her and I having conversations. It hasn't been as consistent since I moved, and because Disney just opened back up. So
Right.
Yeah.
the last time she went to Disney was when the two of us went together in March.
Wow.
So, that's a little bit of a slow go right now, but nobody knows what's happening. So like
Yeah.
all the Disney podcasts are like, okay, what do we talk about? So that one is Disney Native. You can find it on, pretty much all the podcast apps and on Instagram and Facebook. And then my baby, that is just me, that I do all on my own, is Chiaroscuro Horror. And I will let you guys link that in your show notes.
Yes.
Because it's not easy to spell. It's like, I'm like, the name fits what the podcast is really perfectly, but it's also like not good for branding because it's not easy to spell. People are like, where do you find it? But
Well, you have an amazing Instagram account too. You use your design skills to make that look phenomenal. So
I
we've
showed
always-
it off today to Abigail. I was like,
Oh,
she's got
nice.
a killer
thanks.
Insta. Like, you got to look at it.
yeah, that's kind of like my experimental one. I kind of try things I wouldn't normally do for other brands on
Yeah.
there. So yeah, definitely find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook. I have a Patreon. So if you like horror films, give it a listen. And if you like it,
Yes.
support me on Patreon.
That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on the show, and make sure you guys check out everything. All the links and everything will be there at gorogex.com on our blog. And until next time, we'll see you. We'll see you again. Thanks. That was a terrible send off. Dang it.
It's okay. Well, I think I
Um,
gave a really stupid smile at the end.
You're like-
yeah.
So we do a rapid fire at the end, so kind of leave everything
She
running.
told me. She actually could almost say our.
What?
She was like, I listened to your podcast, and I was
She's
like,
like-
oh, okay.
Kind of assume nobody knows who we are or our podcast. So.
Yeah,
Hey, nice.
always.
All right. Well, we're gonna do rapid fire real quick.
Yep.
Do rapid fire. I
Jeez,
promise not to
okay.
ramble. I promise.
Whoa.
What was that laugh? Abigail's like, yeah, right, dude.
Whatever, man.
Really am trying to keep it. Oh. All right. Are you ready for rapid fire, Lauren?
I am ready for rapid fire.
Are you ready for rapid fire, Nichole?
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do this.
What are you reading this month?
Oh, geez. I have not picked up a new book yet, but I just finished Joyland by Stephen King.
Oh,
Oh.
is
It's
that the
really
new one?
fun. No,
Or that
it's
old
a
one?
few years old, but
Okay.
it's perfect for this time of year because it's about a theme park. And this guy goes and works at this theme park where this horrible crime happened. But he works there in the summer, but it transitions to like the fall. towards the end of the book. So
Interesting.
it's a great time to
So
read
I've
it.
been purchasing books for my husband to read, and I've just been choosing. He loves Stephen King, so that might be. He hasn't read that one, so that sounds like a good one.
What's the newest one that he has? That's
He
the only
just read
reason
The
I know.
Institute. Was
The
the one that
Institute,
he
okay.
had read, and he liked it. I think he was a little disappointed in the ending, but
Okay.
Well,
No
that's Stephen
spoilers
King.
here.
yeah. So whatever.
What about you, Lauren? What books?
I am
Or
reading the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Okay.
So it's like or I might have said it backwards, of songs and
Sure.
songbirds
Sure.
and snakes. It's the prequel Hunger Games book.
Oh, I
Yeah.
heard a little bit
So,
about that.
So if you are familiar with that franchise, the evil President Snow,
Mhm.
it's his story of
Okay.
how he became who he is.
Doesn't he have a mentor, or he mentors somebody?
He's
or
a
something like that?
mentor, and it's
Okay.
like back when the Hunger Games wasn't even like a thing.
Okay.
Like people didn't like to watch it, and it's like it's development, and it's like it's very interesting because it kind of goes into like the psychology of how do you control people, and like
Okay.
him
Ooh.
figuring that out, and it's like, and he's like a decent human
Mm.
being. So I haven't finished it yet, so I haven't seen him like devolve, but
Interesting.
it's very interesting. I do not like prequels, but I actually really like this book, so
Nice.
highly recommend it.
So I literally started a book today.
Let me guess, it's a nonfiction book.
Well, yeah, I mean that'd be kind of a given, but based on our pastor's recommendation, 5 Levels of Leadership by
Oh,
John
okay.
Maxwell, and he was
There you
like,
go.
"You need to figure out how to delegate better."
Oh,
I was like,
dang.
"Okay,
Here's a book.
here's a
All
book."
right.
It's like, cool. All right, so I'm in it now, but I really want to find a fiction type book because it's like I want to make sure
can
to get
find 'em.
into. I know.
We can find it.
I just got to find the time too. If I'm doing another podcast, I mean, I got invited to do another podcast by somebody else the other day.
You should totally
so-
have Taylor co-host. That
Oh,
would be
gosh.
hilarious. Okay.
Anyway. All right, next rapid fire.
Okay, controversial question. Should movies wait to return to theaters or go directly to
Oh.
streaming services?
Goodness.
Oh boy. You know, I'm a little torn on this one. I think if studios can wait, I think they should wait because that whole theater going experience is really important, and it's really important for certain films.
Yeah.
And we are rolling into spooky season. And when you go see a horror film, a certain type of
Yeah.
horror film, it really, really makes a difference if you're in the audience with people and, people are like gasping and like screaming and all of that stuff. Like it just
Yes.
really adds to the experience. That being said, there are, financial hurdles and such. And, I would rather see it on streaming than not see it at all.
Sure.
Or if it's like, well, you can see Candyman streaming now, or you have to wait until 2021, I might say, okay, I'll want to see it streaming.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I gave a really hard, clean answer, but they're my
I
thoughts.
don't think that there is a clean answer to that one. What are you thinking?
I'm kind of split because with kids, it's like we're not going to take them to the theater to see this. So like Trolls World Tour,
Yeah.
that was like a big success because it was still more than what I would pay for a movie to be streamed. But then we were able to pay like $5 more and buy it, which we would have probably bought it anyway too.
Sure.
And so that was kind of fun to kind of have that experience and not have to wait for that to come out. But I agree that so Tenet, I'm so excited to see. So Christopher Nolan's new movie.
Ah, yes.
I do not ever want to see that in my home until I see it like 5 times in the theater. So that is kind of like, I agree. It's like there are certain movies that you really need to see in theaters. So you talked about people gasping. That brought back memories of Dr. Sleep and me like on the edge of my seat, like
Right.
heavy panting as I'm like, like things happening. I'm never like scared in movies, but it was like brought back all the
Yeah.
Shining memories. And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like,
So
oh,
you're
this
just,
just
like, tense.
feels, all the feels are happening. So
Sure,
anyway.
because I think I saw A Quiet Place in my living room for the first time, and I
Oh,
remember
dude.
this would have been such a different experience in a theater.
Yeah.
Just seeing it with other people who were just as concerned if someone dropped their candy that we would have all died right then and there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean that was definitely one. I'm very much, if they can wait, I would love that. I know there's been a lot of controversy over like the Mulan release that's like $30 to see it in your house. I'm like, dang. I mean, I know it's going to stick around on
Isn't
your.
it like the most expensive film Disney's made like, ever,
Probably.
or like
I don't know.
it's crazy.
It's just it's hard because like you're like, well, I want to see it. It was my favorite Disney princess as a little girl, but I'm like, do I want to pay $30? I don't know.
I
Yeah.
know.
Well, if you do, you just need to get a as many people as is safe to come to your home.
Yes.
And then it'll be worth it.
Right.
Because you all would have spent that much at the movies anyway.
yeah.
We had talked about that, of doing like just a watch party. Like, well, if we really do want to see it, we'll just all Venmo like $5 and then we'll just make it.
Yeah.
It'll work.
See, this
So,
is we get creative
Yes.
when
There
we
you go.
have to.
yes.
There you go.
So yeah. Anyways, but yeah, I just wanted to get your guys' take on that one. So.
That was good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good questions. Let us know what you think too. We want to know.
Yeah.
All right. We're out.